When a quiet Tennessee town explodes with corruption and hate, a former Navy SEAL and his wife become the targets of a white-collar crime empire disguised as local government. But when they uncover stolen land deeds and decades of buried secrets, their fight for survival turns into a war for truth, live streamed before the entire nation.
Subscribe to Black Battles and hit the bell icon so you never miss our latest powerful stories.
Rain fell softly over the hills of Silver Creek as Ethan Collins tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The wipers swayed rhythmically, clearing the mist from the windshield just enough for him to see the old church ahead, white paint fading, its steeple cutting through the fog like a solemn finger pointing toward heaven. Beside him, Mariah stared out the window, her face reflected faintly in the glass. She hadn't spoken much during the drive. Her heart felt heavy, not only from the loss of Daniel Price, her childhood friend, but from the memories this town carried, memories she had tried for years to bury beneath city life and distance. "Looks just the same," she murmured. "Except quieter." Ethan glanced at her. "Small towns don't change much." "People do, though," she nodded but didn't answer. The church parking lot was half full, mostly with old pickup trucks. Familiar faces moved between umbrellas, offering hugs and quiet condolences. As Ethan opened her door, the smell of wet grass and old pine drifted through the air, the smell of Tennessee after rain. Inside, the church was dimly lit, candles flickering near Daniel's photograph, his smile frozen forever. He'd been a teacher, a mentor, and one of the few who dared to speak against the injustices that had haunted Silver Creek for generations. Mariah's throat tightened as the choir began to sing "Amazing Grace." She reached for Ethan's hand, and for a moment, it felt like time folded in on itself, as though Daniel might still walk through the door with his crooked grin and a stack of lesson papers under his arm. When the service ended, Ethan noticed a tall man standing near the back, someone who didn't sing, didn't bow his head, just watched. His eyes lingered on Ethan and Mariah a little too long before he turned and left. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving behind a gray stillness. People gathered in small groups, reminiscing. Mariah hugged Daniel's mother, whispering her condolences, then excused herself to catch her breath. She walked toward the edge of the cemetery, where the trees thickened and shadows deepened, and that's when she felt it, the distinct sense of being watched. She turned slowly. Through the mist, just beyond the tree line, she caught the faint outline of a man. His stance was rigid, almost military, his features obscured by distance and fog. Then as suddenly as she saw him, he disappeared into the woods. "Ethan," she called softly. There was someone out there, but when he came over, the figure was gone. Only silence and the distant murmur of voices remained. "Probably just someone from the service," he said, scanning the trees. But his tone carried unease. He'd felt it too, that quiet, watching presence. They drove down the winding road from the hilltop church as dusk settled over the town. Old houses lined the streets, some abandoned, others glowing faintly with lamplight. Hand-painted signs still hung over small stores, relics from another time. Yet beneath the charm, something darker pulsed. Mariah looked at the old courthouse, its clock tower frozen at 2:17. "That clock's been stuck for years," she said softly. "Daniel used to joke it stopped the day justice did." Ethan gave a faint smile. "Maybe it's waiting for someone to fix it." They passed a rusted billboard that read, "Welcome to Silver Creek, where tradition lives." The irony wasn't lost on either of them. At the base of the hill, Mariah noticed a small bouquet of wildflowers placed beside a broken mailbox. A handmade cross leaned against it, painted with shaky white letters, "For those who never came home." Her chest tightened again. "You ever feel like some places remember what we try to forget?" Ethan nodded slowly. "Every place has its ghosts." As night fell, the town seemed to retreat into itself. Streetlights flickered, dogs barked in the distance, and rain began to fall again in thin, hesitant drops. When they reached their motel, Ethan stepped out first, scanning the parking lot. A habit born from years of service. Nothing seemed out of place, yet that uneasy feeling lingered. From their window, Mariah looked toward the distant church lights fading on the hill. She couldn't shake the image of that man standing among the trees, silent, watching. Ethan, she whispered. What if Daniel's death wasn't just an accident? Ethan turned from the window. The rain streaked across the glass, distorting the reflection of his face. Then he said quietly, "We find out why." Outside, thunder rolled gently across the hills of Silver Creek. A low, haunting promise that the past was not done with them yet. Morning came with a thin veil of fog rolling off Silver Creek, softening the edges of the town but not its secrets. Ethan and Mariah Collins left the motel early, hoping a warm breakfast might dull the weight that had settled on them since the funeral. The night storm had passed, but something in the air still felt unsettled, as if the town itself was holding its breath. They drove through Main Street, where old brick buildings leaned toward each other like aging storytellers. The streets were quiet, save for the squeak of a hanging sign that read, "Harper's Grill, home of the Silver Creek Special." Mariah smiled faintly. "Daniel used to bring me here after Sunday service," she said. "Said the pancakes were worth forgiving the gossip." Ethan chuckled. "Guess we'll see if they still live up to it." Inside, the diner was a snapshot of another era. Vinyl booths, checkered floor, and a jukebox humming softly in the corner. The air smelled of coffee and fried bacon, but as soon as they stepped in, conversation dropped. Forks froze midair. The locals' eyes flicked toward them, then quickly away, as if remembering an old rule. Don't stare too long. Don't get involved. A woman behind the counter, middle-aged with kind eyes, managed a hesitant smile. "Morning, folks. Sit anywhere you like." They chose a booth near the window. Ethan could feel the glances from the corner tables, not openly hostile, but weighted with curiosity and caution. Mariah tried to focus on the menu, though her hands trembled slightly. "You okay?" Ethan asked softly. "I will be," she said. "I just hate that feeling. Like you don't belong in a place you once called home." Before he could answer, the bell over the door jingled. 5 men walked in, leather vests glistening from the damp morning air. On the back of each was an emblem, a silver eagle clutching a rusted chain. The steel talons eyed Ethan noticed the shift immediately. The chatter at the counter faded to silence. The waitress looked down, pretending to wipe the same spot on the counter. One of the bikers, tall and broad-shouldered, with a scar cutting through his beard, glanced toward their booth and smirked. "Well, look who we got here," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "City folks back from the funeral, huh?" Mariah froze. Ethan stayed calm, lowering his coffee cup slowly. "Just passing through," he said evenly. The man took a few steps closer. "You Daniel's friends?" Ethan nodded once. "We are," the biker's grin faded. "Then maybe you ought to keep on passing through. Silver Creek doesn't take kindly to people stirring up old business." Ethan's jaw tightened, but his tone remained even. "We came to pay our respects. That's all." Another biker leaned against the counter, eyeing Mariah. "Pretty fancy car for visitors. Bet Daniel told y'all a lot before he slipped." Mariah's eyes flashed. "What do you mean by slipped?" The leader chuckled. "Just what the sheriff said. The poor man lost his footing near the creek. Happens." His voice lowered, mocking. "But folks like to make stories out of nothing, especially outsiders." Ethan leaned forward, his calm voice carrying quiet authority. "You've said enough." For a moment, the air grew still. The man's grin faltered as he looked into Ethan's eyes. Not angry, not fearful, but controlled. Disciplined. Like someone who'd seen things far worse than him. The biker hesitated, then scoffed and turned away. "Come on, boys," he muttered. "We got better things to do." The steel talons left as abruptly as they'd come, the bell above the door echoing long after they were gone. Slowly, the diner came back to life. Cautious conversation resumed. Plates clattered, and the waitress exhaled with relief. "I'm sorry," she said, coming over. "They've been hanging around since the new construction project started. Think they own the place." Ethan looked up. "Construction project?" "Yeah, out near the old Hollow Woods," she said quietly. "Word is the mayor's selling land for some big resort. But not everyone's happy about it." She hesitated. Daniel wasn't. He said it didn't add up. Mariah exchanged a glance with Ethan. "He told me that too," she whispered. "Said some deeds were missing. Land that was supposed to belong to families here." The waitress lowered her voice. "You two should be careful. People who ask questions in Silver Creek, they don't always get answers. Sometimes they just disappear. Outside, clouds gathered again, rolling low over the hills. As Ethan paid the bill, he noticed the biker's reflection in the diner's front window, across the street sitting on his motorcycle, watching. Mariah followed his gaze, her pulse quickening. "He's waiting." Ethan put an arm around her shoulder, guiding her to the car. "Let him watch," he said quietly. "He'll see we're not leaving." As they drove away, the reflection of the diner sign flickered in the rearview mirror. Harper's Grill, glowing faintly against the gray morning, like a warning light on the edge of something deeper. Neither of them spoke, but both knew somewhere beneath the quiet of Silver Creek, a story was waking, one that Daniel Price had died trying to tell. The motel sat on the edge of Silver Creek, half hidden by pine trees and the low hum of crickets. The sign out front flickered weakly, Creekside Inn, vacancy. Ethan and Mariah Collins had chosen it for its quiet, but tonight the quiet felt heavy, almost unnatural. It was past midnight when Ethan stirred awake. A faint crackling sound crept through the stillness, like twigs snapping or paper burning. At first he thought it was rain again until the smell reached him, sharp, bitter, unmistakable. "Smoke." "Mariah," he called, already moving. She jolted up, confused, blinking into the darkness. "Ethan, what is it?" "Get up now!" He yanked the curtains open and froze. Their car, parked just outside, was engulfed in flames. Fire licked the hood and windshield, orange light reflecting across the room. The air outside pulsed with heat and the sound of tires popping. Mariah gasped, hand over her mouth. "Oh my God." Ethan grabbed his jacket, pulling her toward the door. "We're fine. Just move." They stumbled into the cool night air as a small explosion rocked the car. The motel manager burst out of his office, shouting, "Call the fire department." "Somebody call it now." Ethan led Mariah back as embers drifted through the air like angry fireflies. The blaze illuminated the woods beyond the lot, and for just a second he saw movement, a shadow slipping between the trees, watching, then gone. The fire truck arrived within minutes, sirens slicing through the night. By then, half the car was gone, leaving only metal and smoke. The deputy who showed up wore his badge tilted and his sleeves rolled high, revealing tattoos crawling up his arms. He scribbled lazily in his notebook, guessing maybe an engine fault. He said, glancing at the wreckage. Ethan looked at him sharply. "Engines don't start themselves in the middle of the night," the deputy shrugged. "Could be electrical, or could be folks shouldn't park too close to the trees out here. Lot of kids messing around lately." Mariah's eyes narrowed. "Kids?" That was no prank. Before Ethan could press further, a voice called from behind. "That's enough, Tom. I'll take it from here." A woman stepped forward, tall in a leather jacket with a notepad tucked under her arm. Her expression was steady, her eyes clear. "Clara Jensen," she said, flashing a press badge. "I'm with the Silver Creek Gazette." The deputy scowled. "Figures. Paper vultures always show up on time." "I was already on my way," Clara said evenly. "Heard about a fire call near the old church road." She turned to Ethan and Mariah. "You two were at Daniel Price's funeral, weren't you?" Mariah hesitated. "Yes, you knew him?" Clara nodded. "We worked together. He'd been digging into something before he died. Property records, missing deeds, town finances. Said it was big. Then suddenly he fell into the creek." She made air quotes with a bitter smile. "Now your car burns down the night after his funeral. Coincidence?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "I stopped believing in coincidence a long time ago." The deputy muttered something under his breath and left, clearly uncomfortable under Clara's gaze. When he was gone, Clara stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Daniel left me a voicemail 3 days before he died. He said he found proof, old land deeds tied to a place called The Hollow. He said if anything happened, to find a couple named Collins. That's you, right?" Mariah's eyes widened. "He mentioned The Hollow once, years ago. Said it was land passed down to freed families after the war. Why would he be looking into that?" "Because someone's trying to take it," Clara replied. "The steel talons have been scaring people off that property for months. Fires, threats, fake court papers, all protected by the sheriff and the mayor's office." Ethan crossed his arms. "And Daniel died after finding evidence." Clara nodded grimly. "I think he was silenced." A cold breeze swept through the lot, carrying the smell of wet ash. The firefighters had left. The motel lights flickered, and all that remained of their car was a blackened shell. Mariah's voice trembled. "So what do we do now?" Clara glanced at the woods. "You stay alive, and tomorrow we start digging." Ethan stared into the ashes, his reflection wavering in the dark metal. "Then we'd better dig deep," he said. "Because whoever lit that fire, they're just getting started." As they walked back to the room, the motel sign buzzed faintly behind them, its red light cutting through the smoke like a heartbeat. Somewhere out in the woods, an engine started, a low rumble fading into the night, and with it, a silent promise that Silver Creek's secrets were about to burn far brighter than any fire. Morning light crept over Silver Creek, painting the wet pavement in streaks of gold. The fire had left more than just ashes. It had left a message. Ethan and Mariah Collins sat outside their motel room with Clara Jensen, the local reporter whose steady confidence made her seem like the only honest thing left in town. She had a leather-bound notebook open on her lap, pages filled with names, dates, and clipped newspaper articles. Across the top of one page, written in Daniel Price's handwriting, were the words, "The hollow, buried truth runs deep." Mariah traced the words with her finger. "He must have meant the hollow woods," she said quietly. "That land was passed down through my grandfather's church. It was supposed to belong to 5 families, all black, all local. But one by one they lost it," Clara nodded. "Daniel thought those land seizures weren't accidents. He believed someone forged the deeds and funneled the property into the hands of the mayor's office and the development company behind the new resort." Ethan leaned back, his eyes sharp. "The same resort the Steel Talons are guarding." "Exactly," Clara said. "And the same one Sheriff Briggs keeps calling Silver Creek's future." The motel manager passed by, eyeing them warily. "You folks staying another night?" "Yeah," Ethan said, though his tone made clear it wasn't for the scenery. When he left, Clara pulled a small flash drive from her pocket. "Daniel sent this to me a week before his death. Said it contained proof, but I can't open it without the password. Maybe his old office might hold a clue." Mariah's breath hitched. "His office? That's in the school, right?" Clara nodded. "They sealed it after his death. But I still have my old press badge. I can get us in." Ethan gave a slow, careful nod. "Then we move before anyone knows we're looking." That afternoon, the 3 of them drove to Silver Creek High. The building sat at the end of a quiet road lined with oaks, its red brick walls cracked from years of neglect. Inside, the hallways smelled faintly of chalk and old varnish. Clara led them to a locked door marked Room 204, History Department. She pulled out a thin metal pick, glancing around. "You didn't see this," she whispered with a quick smile. A soft click, and the door opened. Daniel's office was frozen in time. Stacks of papers, books piled high, and a corkboard filled with photos and maps. Across one wall was a detailed diagram of Silver Creek, red pins marking certain locations. The courthouse, the mayor's office, the sheriff's station, and deep in the forest. The hollow. Mariah stepped closer. He knew it all. Clara began searching through a box labeled Deeds and Transfers. Inside were photocopies of land titles, all belonging to black families from the 1960s onward, each with signatures that looked eerily similar. "These aren't just forgeries," Clara whispered. "They're templates. Someone's been mass-producing fake ownership papers for decades." Ethan opened the top drawer of Daniel's desk. Inside was a single envelope yellowed with age. On the front, in Daniel's handwriting, "For the ones who come after me," he opened it carefully. Inside were coordinates scribbled on a piece of paper, numbers in a single line beneath them. "Follow the creek. Listen to the ground," Mariah frowned. He buried something out there. Before they could speak again, a noise echoed down the hall. Heavy footsteps. Ethan gestured for silence, his instincts kicking in. He peered through the small window in the door. 2 men in deputy uniforms were walking toward the room, one of them holding a radio. "Sheriff says someone's been snooping around. Said to check the Price office." Clara's eyes widened. "We need to go." Ethan grabbed the envelope and the flash drive, tucking them into his jacket. "Window?" They slipped out through the narrow back window, landing behind the school just as the door burst open behind them. The sound of boots echoed inside, but they were already gone, disappearing into the thick cover of trees behind the property. By evening, they were back at the motel, breathless but safe. Mariah sat on the bed, the coordinates spread out before her. The numbers led to a place deep within the hollow woods, near a section locals called the Sunken Field, an area said to flood every spring, swallowing anything left behind. Clara looked between them. If Daniel hid evidence there, we'll have to go at dawn. It's too dangerous at night. And if the sheriff's already looking for us, Ethan finished for her, then they already know we're close. He looked out the window. Across the road, a black pickup truck idled with its lights off. The same one he'd noticed outside Harper's Grill. Mariah's voice was barely a whisper. They're watching us. Ethan didn't turn away from the window. Good, he said quietly. Let them watch. Tomorrow we find out what Daniel died for. Outside, thunder rolled again across Silver Creek, low and steady, like the growl of something ancient waiting to be uncovered. Dawn broke in thin bands of orange and pink over Silver Creek. The storm clouds had drifted east, leaving the air heavy and damp. A fog clung to the forest floor like breath on glass. Ethan Collins tightened the straps on his backpack, checked his flashlight, and scanned the tree line. This is it, he said quietly. Coordinates lead straight through those woods. Mariah stood beside him, her hair pulled back, determination burning in her eyes despite the exhaustion of the last few days. Daniel wanted someone to find what he buried. We can't stop now. Clara Jensen tucked her camera into her jacket and adjusted her press badge, not for access, but as a reminder of why she was there. Let's move before the sheriff's men start sniffing around again. They followed a narrow trail along the creek, the same one that gave the town its name. The air was filled with the sound of dripping leaves and distant birdsong. As they walked deeper into the hollow woods, the trees grew taller, their trunks twisted and scarred, as if the forest itself remembered what had been done to it. After nearly an hour, they reached a clearing, the Sunken Field. The ground dipped slightly, slick with mud and scattered with wildflowers. A broken wooden fence ran along one edge, half swallowed by vines. This is the spot, Clara said, checking her phone. The coordinates match exactly. Ethan scanned the area, his instincts sharp. If Daniel hid something, it's underfoot. Mariah dropped to her knees, brushing aside wet leaves. Her hands hit something solid, the corner of an old tin box buried beneath the soil. Here, she whispered. Ethan helped her dig it out. The box was rusted and sealed tight, but still intact. He pried it open carefully, revealing a bundle of waterproof envelopes and a small flash drive, identical to the one Clara already had. Inside the envelopes were old photographs, notarized documents and property maps, all showing the same thing, families of color-signing deeds they never received, their land transferred to dummy corporations controlled by Mayor Harlan Ridge and Sheriff Briggs. Clara's hands trembled as she flipped through them. This is everything Daniel talked about. The whole scheme. Decades of theft covered by intimidation and false records. Mariah stared at the photos. One showed her grandfather standing on church land that no longer existed. Her voice broke. They stole our history. Every acre, every name. Gone. Ethan placed a steady hand on her shoulder. Not anymore. A sudden snap of a branch echoed through the trees. Ethan turned sharply, hand instinctively moving toward his side. Through the fog, movement flickered, dark shapes closing in. Company, he said under his breath. 3 men emerged from the trees, their vests marked with the steel talons emblem. One held a shotgun casually across his arm. Mornin', he drawled. Sheriff says y'all been trespassing. Clara hid the box behind her leg. This is public land, the leader smirked. Not anymore. Belongs to the Ridge Development Company now. Guess you didn't get the memo. Mariah's pulse hammered. Ethan stepped forward, calm but firm. We're leaving. Nobody wants trouble. Too late for that, the man said, raising his shotgun just enough to make his point. Before he could take another step, a voice rang out from behind, sharp, commanding. That's enough. A young deputy stood on the trail with his sidearm drawn. His uniform was standard issue, but his stance was firm, unshaken. It was Caleb Turner, one of Briggs's newer hires, quiet, steady-eyed, and, up until now, loyal to the sheriff. Put the weapon down, Caleb ordered. You're off the books here and I've got the body cam running. The biker hesitated, then lowered the shotgun slowly. You got no idea what you're messing with, kid. Maybe not, Caleb said. But I know corruption when I see it. He turned to Ethan, Mariah, and Clara. Get out of here. Take what you found, and don't stop until you're somewhere safe. Ethan met his gaze. Why help us? Caleb's voice softened. Because Daniel Price was my teacher. He taught me what justice was supposed to mean. Without another word, they grabbed the box and hurried down the path as Caleb stayed behind, keeping the bikers at bay. The sound of raised voices faded behind them, replaced by the steady rush of the creek. By the time they reached Clara's car, the morning sun had burned away the fog. Ethan placed the box gently in the trunk. We have everything we need, he said. Now we show the world. Clara nodded, determination replacing fear. There's a gala tonight at Silver Hall, the mayor's anniversary event. Press, cameras, the whole town watching. Mariah looked back toward the woods, the shadows shrinking in the light. Then that's where this ends. Ethan's gaze hardened, the reflection of sunlight flashing in his eyes. No, he said quietly. That's where the truth begins. As they drove away, the trees whispered behind them. The wind carrying Daniel Price's voice, unseen but ever present, as if the forest itself approved. Silver Hall stood glittering under a canopy of lights, its marble columns wrapped in golden ribbons. The annual town gala was supposed to celebrate one Silver Creek, one future. But beneath the music and laughter, corruption wore its finest suit. Mayor Harlan Ridge smiled for the cameras, shaking hands with businessmen and posing beside his wife. Sheriff Briggs lingered near the bar, watching the crowd with that wolfish calm that came from knowing no one dared cross him. But tonight, that was about to change. Ethan Collins, Mariah Collins, and journalist Clara Jensen stood in the parking lot, their car hidden behind rows of oak trees. The cool night air buzzed with crickets and distant music. Inside the trunk sat the rusted tin box, the one filled with deeds, maps, and signed confessions tying the mayor and sheriff to decades of land theft and intimidation. Clara adjusted the camera strapped to her shoulder. The live stream will go directly to 3 national outlets. Once it starts, no one can shut it down. Ethan checked his earpiece. We walk in, blend with the crowd, and wait for my signal. Mariah, once the footage starts, make sure everyone sees those documents. Don't let them take them from you, no matter what happens. Mariah nodded, her fingers tightening around the folder in her purse. We've come too far to let fear win now. They entered the hall like ghosts stepping into enemy territory. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead. Violins played softly, and the scent of champagne and expensive perfume filled the air. No one noticed the quiet fury behind their calm expressions. Clara's camera light blinked red. Live. At the podium, Mayor Ridge raised his glass, his smile wide and rehearsed. To progress, he said, and to the unity that binds Silver Creek together. Ethan's voice echoed from the back of the hall, cutting through the applause. Unity built on stolen land isn't progress, Mr. Mayor. The room froze. Heads turned. Ridge squinted into the crowd. Who said that? Ethan stepped forward, his tall frame steady, eyes locked on the mayor. You and your sheriff have been robbing this town blind for 30 years. Daniel Price tried to expose it, and you killed his reputation for it. Briggs stiffened, his hand drifting toward his belt. You're making a dangerous accusation, son. Clara moved beside Ethan, her camera now pointed directly at the stage. The feed streamed live, tens of thousands of viewers watching across the country. This isn't an accusation, she said clearly. It's evidence. Mariah opened the folder, holding up copies of signed deeds and notarized documents. The crowd murmured. People recognized family names, street names, even church land that had mysteriously changed ownership. Ridge tried to laugh it off. Forgery. Cheap theatrics. But Clara clicked a button on her phone, and the giant projector screen behind the stage flickered to life. Video files began to play. Footage of secret meetings, voice recordings of Briggs threatening homeowners, and scanned land transfers with the mayor's signature filled the screen. Gasps rippled through the hall. Some guests stood in shock. Others turned their eyes away, unwilling to face what they'd ignored for years. Briggs lunged forward. Shut that off. Ethan moved faster. Don't. His voice was calm, but his stance made clear he wouldn't hesitate to defend them. Two of the steel talons, dressed in suits as security, moved toward the trio. Before they could act, the doors at the back of the hall burst open. State Prosecutor Renee Callahan, flanked by troopers, strode in. "Nobody moves," she said, her badge catching the light. Her voice boomed. "We've been monitoring the live feed. Mayor Ridge, Sheriff Briggs, you are under arrest for racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy." The crowd erupted. Reporters swarmed, flashing cameras, shouting questions. Ridge's smile crumbled, replaced by pure disbelief. Briggs tried to step forward, but troopers seized him, twisting his arms behind his back. "You can't do this," Ridge shouted as he was handcuffed. "I own this town." Callahan stared him down. Not anymore. As the corrupt officials were led out, the orchestra stood silently, the violins forgotten. The townspeople stared at Ethan, Mariah, and Clara, some ashamed, some inspired. For the first time in decades, the truth had broken through the walls of silence. Outside, the night was electric with the flashing lights of patrol cars. Clara stopped by the steps, holding her camera steady as she narrated live. For years, the people of Silver Creek lived under fear and deception. Tonight, justice begins. Mariah looked at Ethan, tears glistening in her eyes. Daniel Price didn't die for nothing. Ethan's gaze swept over the flashing lights, the gathering crowd, the freed townspeople reclaiming their voices. "No," he said softly. "He died so this town could live again." Clara smiled, her lens capturing the moment. "And the world is finally watching." Morning came quietly to Silver Creek. The storm of the night before, flashing lights, arrests, shouting, had given way to a dawn that felt strangely peaceful. The town square, once filled with banners praising corrupt leaders, now stood bare. Only the American flag fluttered gently in the cool breeze, its colors bright against the pale sky. Ethan Collins sat on the steps of the rebuilt Mason Diner, now renamed the Creekside Cafe, a place that had become the heart of the town once more. The smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls drifted from the open doors. Inside, laughter mingled with the clinking of mugs, the sound of a community rediscovering itself. Mariah Collins came out with 2 cups, handing one to him. "You know," she said softly, "I still expect to see those bikes come roaring down Main Street." Ethan gave a faint smile. "Old ghosts don't vanish in a day, but they stop haunting once the truth's been told." The town had changed faster than anyone expected. After the arrests of Mayor Ridge and Sheriff Briggs, state investigators swarmed Silver Creek. Dozens of false land transfers were reversed, and the stolen properties were returned to their rightful families. Businesses that once feared retribution opened their doors again, and the local paper, under new leadership, began publishing honest stories about what had really happened over the years. Clara Jensen, the journalist whose footage had gone viral, became something of a national name overnight, but she didn't leave town. Instead, she rented a small apartment above the newspaper office and continued covering Silver Creek, not for fame, but for healing. One morning, she joined Ethan and Mariah at the cafe. Her camera hung loosely around her neck, though for once it wasn't recording. "People are calling Silver Creek a miracle town," she said with a small laugh. "The place that stood up to its own darkness and won." Ethan leaned back, his gaze sweeping over the bustling street, vendors selling fruit, children chasing each other, a mural of Daniel Price painted on the side of the library. "It's not a miracle," he said. "It's justice, the kind we almost forgot we were capable of." Mariah nodded quietly. Daniel believed in this town even when it didn't believe in him. He saw light where everyone else saw rust and ash. Clara smiled. "And because of that, others will too." The cafe door opened and Deputy Caleb Turner stepped inside. No longer wearing the sheriff's badge, the department had been completely restructured. He now served on the Community Safety Council, a citizen-led task force ensuring fairness and accountability. He waved at the trio, his easy grin returning some of the youth he'd lost. "Got a call from the prosecutor's office," Caleb said, joining them at the table. "Ridge and Briggs took plea deals. They'll be in prison for a long time. The money they stole, what's left of it, is being used for a new community center." Mariah exhaled almost in disbelief. They'll finally give something back to the town they tried to destroy. Ethan's expression hardened for a moment, but then softened. That's more than they deserve, but maybe it's what the town needs. Closure. A breeze carried the scent of magnolia trees through the air. Across the street, workers were planting saplings near the church grounds, the same land that once belonged to Mariah's grandfather. A small sign read, "In memory of those who lost everything so others could begin again." Tears welled in her eyes. "He'd be proud," she whispered. "He'd be proud of you," Ethan said gently. Clara lifted her camera and snapped a quiet photo, not for the front page, but for herself. The light hit them just right. Ethan, the soldier who fought without weapons. Mariah, the woman who refused to be silenced. And Clara, the voice that carried their story to the world. Later that evening, the town gathered for a candlelight vigil in the square. Music played softly, a gospel choir singing "This Little Light of Mine." Children handed out candles as people of every race and age came together. There were no speeches, no grandstanding, just unity. Ethan stood with Mariah near the front, their hands intertwined. The flickering candlelight painted their faces in warm gold. Clara stepped up beside them. "You think it'll last?" she asked quietly. Ethan looked out over the crowd. The same people who once whispered in fear, now singing together under the open sky. "Maybe not forever," he said, "but it'll last long enough for the next generation to remember what we did here." Mariah smiled faintly. "And what we stood for." The choir's voices rose, the harmony swelling across the square like sunlight after a storm. For the first time in decades, Silver Creek felt alive, truly alive. As the last verse faded, Clara lowered her camera, her eyes glistening. "What will you do now, Ethan?" she asked. He looked up at the old clock tower, its hands repaired, ticking steadily again after years of neglect. "We'll stay," he said. "Rebuild. Help others find what we almost lost. Hope." Mariah leaned her head on his shoulder. "Maybe even open that youth center we talked about." Ethan smiled. "Yeah, teach them to fight, not with fists, but with truth." The crowd began to disperse, leaving hundreds of glowing candles burning in the night. The wind carried the faintest sound, as if Daniel Price's voice echoed through the trees once more. "Keep the light burning." Ethan turned, gazing into the horizon where dawn would soon rise again. Silver Creek, once broken, bloodied and forgotten, now stood reborn, not through power, not through revenge, but through courage, truth, and the unyielding belief that even the smallest town can stand tall when it remembers its soul. Final words. Justice is not born in courts or headlines. It begins in hearts brave enough to speak, and in towns strong enough to listen.